Okay, recording.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for part 3 of our digital online panel. Today's topic is quite an exciting one, and we can't wait for you guys to both meet the moderator and the presenter. My name is Alan. I'm from Environics Analytics. I'm the VP and the not-for-profit lead. One of the co-hosts with my friend Matthew Dubins, who's the co-founder of Donor Science Consulting. We're excited about today. So all I want to do is remind you, one, we are recording, as we just stated. So we will make the recording available after today's session. And if everyone could just make sure that your speakers are off, if they're not, that'd be greatly appreciated. And send us any questions you may have, and we'll make sure to answer them after the fact and send them back to you. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our moderator for today, Anne Rosenfield from Hilborn E-News. Anne, take it away.
Thank you so much, Alan, and thank you, Matthew, and for co-hosting. In the interest of the recording, I'm just going to briefly introduce the co-hosts and the panel so that for anyone who may have visual impairment, you're still able to follow along. I'm Anne Rosenfield, the editor of Hilborn Charity E-News. The co-hosts and panelists today are Matthew Dubbins, founder of Donor Science Consulting, Alan Davidoff, who is the vice president and not-for-profit lead for Environics Analytics, Celeste Bannon-Waterman, who is a partner and lead research and analytics at KCI, Greg Lead data scientist at Fundmetric, and Roger Devine, Associate Dean of External Affairs for Strategy and Innovation, University of Southern California. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to go right into our first question and encourage everyone. You can always look up our folks on LinkedIn later. So the first question for the panel is, what is artificial intelligence and what does it mean to use it in a nonprofit? And Matthew, I'm going to actually, for this one, start with you if I may.
All right, thank you very much, Anne. So you'd think artificial intelligence has a fancy definition, but it really doesn't. It's just simply the ability of a computer to learn and perform activities that are normally thought to require human intelligence. This happens actually to be a really broad definition, perhaps even broader than you initially realized. But we're interested in why and how AI gets used, AI or artificial intelligence gets used in the nonprofit sector. The most important thing that anyone can do in the nonprofit sector is to learn from past activities. For example, which donors were most likely to give $10,000 or more, or maybe who converted to monthly giving. And you might even ask, what's the best kind of messaging with which to communicate with different subsets of your donors? That's just a subset of the entirety of questions that you can ask and answer, not only with your own learning processes, but with AI as well. Honestly, the kinds of activities that we learn from in a nonprofit just seem too many to count. So without the aid of computer-mediated learning, really we're left to our own devices. How do we do it? Well, we might have observed a few instances where something worked well. Perhaps a new cause marketing tactic worked really well, or a TV spot worked really well, or maybe we had a direct mail piece that was just fantastic. And so we repeat our winning formula in whichever campaign at whichever time that we see fit. Does it work well again? Well, it may work well for certain subsets of your donor population, and it might work well for a time, but really that might very well be it. So this kind of anecdotal learning is what we all tend to use on a daily basis in and outside of a nonprofit. But by its nature, it can't really take into account too much complexity. Using artificial intelligence in a nonprofit means that you can take into account more than just a few variables when making decisions. That's powerful. You can simultaneously take into account demographics, biographical characteristics, past donor behavior, and really all sorts of preferences. And then the decision making that this enables means that your campaigns are targeted with much greater precision, and that you get to reach the right people at the right time with the right kind of offer, with a higher success rate than you'd be able to do just with your own human intelligence otherwise. And that to me is what artificial intelligence means and what it means to use it in a nonprofit.
Great. Thank you so much, Matthew. I'm just going to quickly check if any of the other panel as just a brief anything that you want to be sure gets brought into this conversation now. So I'm just going to open that to any panel. Otherwise, we'll move on. But I'm just going to pause here.
Hi, Ann. This is Roger, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. First and foremost, and building on what Matthew shared, I would offer our audience to think about in their own nonprofit organizations for AI, this notion of process automation, cognitive insights, and then cognitive engagement. Because when we're talking about AI and how we can use these tools, which are a means to an end, thinking about some of the impact. But first and foremost, it's going to be how do we drive growth in our organizations and how do we unlock value? And AI is an important part of a future toolkit and to enable these kinds of insights and growth.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Roger. And I feel like cognitive insights and cognitive engagement leads us actually directly to question number 2. Question number 2 is, what are some of the key takeaways that nonprofits try to respond to, anticipate, or use to influence giving preferences to better serve their donors and to maximize the benefit for both sides? So I think that's an example of cognitive insights and cognitive engagement. So I don't know if there's any member of the panel who'd like to start off.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thanks, Greg.
With everything that's going on in the news these days, I'm seeing the quote all the time: when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Well, you can do that with your data if you record it. So people tell you all the time through what they do with the emails you send them or any communication, what they actually care about. So, I mean, everybody wants to be donor-centric, but one way to do that is to actually look at what people are telling you they care about, and then in the future just to tailor the message to them in such a way that you show them that you listened and that you give them information they actually care about. So the only way to do that, of course, so the key ways that you can do it are to record that data, right? Did people open your email? Did they open it more than once? Did they watch the video? And if they clicked the link, which links did they click? And this actually works in the opposite way. If you look at it negatively, is if you start telling them about something they don't care about, then they're less likely to give. And I just had a personal experience where an organization thanked me for a gift that I did not give. And that makes me less likely to want to give to them because I don't think that they are paying attention to what their donors do. So I think all that data that Matthew talked about, and he alluded to, there is more. This is one type of it, right? What are people actually doing with the communications you send them. So I think that's an important point.
Great, thank you so much. I'm noting we're getting a little feedback, so I'm going to suggest for panel that you mute yourself when you're not speaking. I'm just wondering if anyone else would like to weigh in on this question about key takeaways to better serve donors and maximize benefit for both sides. And gosh, sending a thank you note to someone who hasn't given seems like probably minimizing benefit. So anyone got other thoughts on maximizing benefit?
I'll jump in. Celeste here. And I think Greg captured some of this. One of the things we always talk about is the idea that the key part of donor recognition is not, you know, the signs on the wall, you know, or naming of a building sometimes. It's really about that recognizing who somebody is and getting that sense of what their interests are, you know, what they respond to, what they don't. But also really, I think, to take it just to another level, recognizing patterns of giving, I think, are really important in terms of things like when do they typically give, you know, what are some other ways that we can maybe propose alternates to them that they might be interested in, whether that's, you know, we recognize you're really interested in cardiac care. Can we also talk to you about stroke, for example, stroke care that we do at our hospital, if that's an example, or something that's aligned like that. Or, you know, if you notice somebody tends to give in October and they haven't, well, maybe they're due a call, right? And it's that kind of personal touch that I think Greg really touched on, that people are looking for increasingly as they know we have this data available. They're seeing it happen with other types of organizations, and they're expecting it more and more from charities.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on this question? I know donors are much on our minds these days.
I would emphasize that compared to traditional methods of analysis, AI allows us to approach these familiar problems with a more data-intensive and data-rich way. So building on what Celeste was talking about, donor connectivity, donor centricity, donor engagement, intimacy with understanding them. In many organizations, we can use the data that we have and acquire additional data to, again, take a more multifaceted, context and information-rich approach to better understand our donors where they are today, so we can move a relationship forward.
Awesome, thank you so much, Roger. I'm just going to remind everyone to mute, just so that we don't have any, we don't learn any surprises about your favorite taste in music. Does any of the other panels members have anything they want to say about donors and how to maximize benefit using data?
I'll just say, I guess it's Alan here.
Thanks, Alan.
In a time where we have like a plethora of data coming at us and we're collecting data from all over the place, AI really helps to focus in on what's really important and weed through all of the different data points. So it really helps you get to a lot of what's been mentioned by Celeste and others, trying to make sure that we're very donor focused and we maximize the opportunities to reach donors in the right way and kind of how they're expecting, but also in a way it kind of helps you really focus in on the key data points that are really important. So a lot of the structures in the building really help you focus in on that. So it gives you better outcomes too, by making it easier.
Great, thank you so much. If we could move on to the next question. Thank you for talking about what donors are looking for, maybe some of what they're not looking for. And I think this is a great question, certainly for me. What can AI do and what can't it do with the tantalizing question yet? So any panelists want to talk a bit about what AI can do and maybe what it can't do yet?
I'll jump in quickly here and say that AI makes it possible to write computer programs that can play chess and beat the top world champions. We're seeing self-driving cars. most of these really advanced applications rely heavily on deep learning and natural language processing. So in the last decade, we'd seen this explosion of novel diagnosis, translating languages, transcribing speech, pattern recognition, even generating images. So in terms of what AI can do at scale, it can help us manage an unwieldy amount of data and surface insights quickly for various types of business domains and applications. However, where AI struggles is sometimes in confounding situations or use cases that the AI hasn't seen before. It hasn't seen that particular case. So there's a growing body of research that's looking at causal inference. So where AI is really strong is taking lots of data, identifying correlations and patterns, and building predictions based on data that it does see. But in terms of that kind of what we would consider to be human intelligence or common sense, and quickly seeing, okay, wait, I think this might be driving some of the actual outcomes. And there's a whole body of research that's advancing our understanding. I'd say once AI makes a lot of inroads in causal inference, we're going to unlock a whole other dimension. And for those who are interested in causal inference, you can read a little bit more about Judea Pearl's work at UCLA. And I'm happy to put in some additional resources in the chat.
Great, thank you, Roger, and thank you for noting that in the chat, and way to represent the University of California system with the shout out to UCLA. Matthew, do you have some thoughts on this topic you want to share?
I do, thanks, Anne. So my answers are going to come from a place of my experience using artificial intelligence in the nonprofit sector. Let me provide a caveat. I'm not a computer scientist, so the lens through which I see AI is just how I've used it in the past, but also how I've seen others use it in the nonprofit sector. So in terms of what I understand that AI can do, it's really, it can use what you've recorded about your prospects or donors to learn things like who's most likely to engage in high value donor behaviors. And again, that could be major giving or recurring or monthly giving. It could also learn things like, who's likely to respond to an acquisition campaign, who's likely to respond to campaigns over, either direct mail or through email or through telemarketing, or maybe, some multi-channel combination versus non-multi-channel. Also, it can help you to learn things like how much money to ask each of your donors in the upcoming campaign, finding natural groupings or clusters of your donors to use for communications purposes as well. It can help you to project next year's fundraising results based on past trajectories. And I'm kind of laughing about that because if anyone made any fundraising projections for this coming year, it certainly didn't take into account the whole pandemic. Sorry, bitter laughter here, bitter laughter. Anyway, in terms of what it can't do, you're not going to be able to confidently project how well a completely different and new fundraising campaign is going to do. or confidently project the potential effect of current events on fundraising. So I'll mention the pandemic again. It's a little bit hard to project that, but I'm happy to be proven wrong, or maybe not so happy to be proven wrong. I'm not sure. And also, you're not going to be able to predict which donors are going to do something that few or none of your donors have done in the past. Because by its nature, artificial intelligence requires data. It requires records of past activities. And if there aren't sufficient numbers of people who've engaged in those past activities, then it's not going to be able to infer a generalization well enough to be able to predict which donors who haven't done this thing in the past, whatever the thing is, are going to do it in the future. And I mean, that's the, can do's and can't do's from my perspective, Anne.
Little disappointed you guys can't predict unanticipated events like pandemics. Celeste, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I do. And I think these are all great points. And in particular, building on what Matthew and Roger have said, AI isn't great at those leaps of creativity that the human brain is. And I think it's important for us to just every once in a while pat ourselves on the back for that, that we still have things that machines can't do. But I think there's one thing when we talk about AI that I always want to raise as a flag. And what it can't do right now, I would say, is question bias. And it can't necessarily look at those patterns. It's very good at predicting patterns of, this happened in the past, or, to Matthew's point around clusters of donors, these are what your best donors look like. But it can't look at that and say, well, why is that? And is that what we really want? So I know I've talked about, thanks, Wes. Just saw Wes's comment, but I've talked about, when I've talked to arts and culture groups about this. If we ran models on, for example, I'm just going to pick on arts and culture charities, and I know there's a couple in the audience here today. If we look at who their typical best donors are, we can end up with a fairly stereotypical picture. And I'm just going to leave it to you to imagine what that stereotypical picture might look like. But there's the human piece, which has to say, number one, why is that? Is that because that's really who supports, or is that who we've traditionally asked because of our own inherent biases, or in terms of bias around our experience, or biases around who has wealth in the country? And what do we want to do about that going forward? Is that who we actually should be focusing on and thinking about, or do we want to think about broadening our tent a little bit? And it's that creative piece that I think is really important. But the piece I want to leave you with is AI is incredibly powerful. I think it has huge value, but I think we always have to be remembering that bias piece when we look at the results of it.
Thank you so much, Celeste. And you actually led right into our next question, which are some objectives of using AI and neural network-based approaches. You just talked about identifying potential donors, as well as the issue, I think, around bias, suggesting tailored messaging, creating fundraising projections, although Matthew and Wes later can duke it out on whether how well pandemic prediction runs, as well as segmenting and clustering prospects. So I want to throw this question open to the panel. It's a pretty rich question. We might spend just a couple extra minutes on this because there's a lot of density in there. So Celeste kicked us off with identifying potential donors. Anyone else on any of these other 4 subtopics?
Sure. Greg Lee here. We are at Fundmetric doing quite a bit of research on the time series aspect of things. So looking at what people have done in order they did it. And we actually recently published a paper on this, so we could predict how much somebody was going to give based on looking back at their previous 6 actions in that case, or your actions towards them. So like I spoke about earlier, opening emails, clicking links. And using recurrent neural networks, we were able to get down to an error of about $25. And very recently, and stuff that I'm supposed to be working on right after this, we've reduced that error down to about $16, the accuracy of it. So a lot of the predictions that we talked about and when we do at Fundmetric is, yes, creating that list. But what you lose in some of that data is it's just point in time, right? It's not telling me what your current trajectory is. So if you take, there's machine learning out there and AI to do that. You can, if you take that into account, you can learn quite a bit about what's the next best thing you should do. What should you put in your next email? And I'm not talking about content necessarily, or at all, more about the structure of the email and should you even send it? Should you wait? Maybe people aren't waiting, aren't looking to get another message right now, right? And you even talked about thank yous for not if I didn't get, but think about maybe the next thing you should send is a thank you, of course. Just because I didn't get a chance on the last question, I want to speak about the pandemic quickly. We've had some clients that actually have done tremendously well by asking for making appeals right now, because there's people out there that want to help, right? All kinds of people are hurting right now, obviously, but the people who aren't are aware of that and want to give. And if you give them the opportunity, such as we've done, you can see some tremendous results. So sorry not to cheat on that question.
I don't think you cheated at all. It's an important point. And I think there's the, you know, in fundraising, people are talking a lot about fundraising hesitation. And it's important, I will say, I'm going to respond momentarily and then open it back to the panel. Like, I think the question we want to ask ourselves is, what world do we want to wake up to in 2023? And I think we're asking that question in many more ways today than we were a month ago. But I still think it's a question that we want to be asking. And I understand that, Matthew, you've got something you'd like to add, if you could, about this topic. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So in much of my career in the nonprofit space, I've been creating models to identify potential donors who will convert, donors who will upgrade, donors who will reactivate, so on and so forth. So from my view, based on all of the work that I've done in this space, the aim of AI in this case is to assign a score to each donor based on how likely they are to, you know, whatever the philanthropic behavior of interest is. Could be that the nonprofit wants to figure out which low-level donor has the highest chance of being influenced to become major, or, you know, monthly, whatever. But the main thing is the AI professional to create a machine learning model that takes into account so many different variables, which I alluded to earlier, just in order to develop a concise picture of your target donor's characteristics. So once that picture is developed, then the donors can be scored and ranked. So these scores and ranks become what I like to call each donor's propensity to give or convert. You can then cross that with some kind of philanthropic capacity rating, so that you can segment the database of donors or prospects in priority order based on who has the highest propensity and capacity to give or convert first, and then other subgroups afterward. So this kind of project, I've found, tends to take about 3 weeks under normal circumstances, you know, when you don't have your kids running around at home. But in terms of results, I would hope to see, you know, at least 15% higher results from a fundraising or response rate perspective when you compare results using the AI model up against previous campaigns or years when no model was used. And that's my perspective on the objective of identifying potential donors using AI.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Celeste and Alan, I just want to check in with you guys because I feel like I've cut both of you off a little bit in some of your past questions. So I want to just check if you want to weigh in on this one.
I might just jump in and say, in addition to, I think, just to build on what some of the panelists have said, I think we're going beyond segmentation in some AI applications. And one of the things I'm really excited about is the timing recommendations that we see more and more. And that especially happens with that real-time analysis that we see when we've kind of built something that we hook up directly to the database. There's a variety of ways to do that. But when you've got something that's kind of feeding in real-time data and then popping out alerts and advisories is where I think the future of AI is going to go. And that, I think, is really what's exciting to me personally. So for example, you know, things where you can come in the next day and, you know, a fundraiser can log into their computer or pick up their phone. Obviously, I sound so old saying log into my computer, but showing my age. But, you know, look at the phone or however they get information, and they can have a quick little alert of, hey, these 5 donors, you know, it might be a great time to reach out to them for X, Y, and Z. I think that is where we're going, which I think is really super cool and exciting. I bring that with all my caveats that I said before, but I think that kind of personal, bringing it back to the lots of data crunching, but bringing it back to really personal connections so that people are best used on the part where they're really excellent, which is that relationship building and that communication part, and letting the data kind of crunch in the background, I think is going to be a potential game changer for philanthropy.
I'm glad to hear that our robot overlords are not yet going to be able to completely run the earth. I'm going to go ahead and suggest we go on to the next question, but I'm just going to pause to make sure no one's got any. I just feel like this is, it says question number 4, but I feel like it's actually question number 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I just want to check if anyone's got any thoughts on tailored messaging, creating fundraising projections inside of or outside of a pandemic, and segmenting. And Celeste, you just talked a little bit about this timing question is maybe a step further in terms of segmenting. But I want to pause here because there, as I say, it's a very rich question, and I don't want to just skim over it.
I would offer that some of our participants today might be thinking about prospecting, donor outreach within their respective organizations. And I would encourage everybody to really focus in on 1 or 2 kind of key areas where they think if they were able to solve for that particular problem, they could really make impact in their organizations. That's a really great point of departure for diving into AI, because then you have that business question or problem can translate to a data question, and then through analysis you can get some insights and translate it back to create value and impact for your organization. So like with COVID, we mentioned earlier, many organizations are not able to do in-person events. So if you're doing digital events, what kind of data are you collecting about the participants? And could you use that data to identify engagement and so forth? Looking through the lens, maybe you have more prospects than you could ever outreach in a lifetime, great. But of those, could you use AI to filter and prioritize your efforts and resources as we are all becoming more mindful in light of current circumstances? And the messaging piece, again, we want the right messaging at the right time to the right constituents. How confident are you in that current capability in your organization? And if you think that that's a gap, taking that gap, that problem turns into a challenge and an opportunity to then apply AI to improve your efficiencies and effectiveness.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, so moving on to our next question, which seems so much simpler and shorter. What are some common data sources and prerequisites for implementing AI in nonprofit contexts. I'm just going to open this up to any panelist for their thoughts.
I'm happy to go, but don't need to go first every time in case it seems that way. So there's most people, I think, who work in the industry know you can go get social data on your constituents as well as wealth data. So in our experience at Fundmetric, this hasn't helped a ton in AI. It can help give you a broad view, like how many people in your database use Facebook, so maybe you could do a campaign through it, that kind of thing. And then of course Matthew talked about all the other data sources you already have. Your database is the main one. I mean, it's that simple. But it's all about actually collecting and labeling your data properly, and all the stuff I talked about to begin with, you have to actually keep track of it. So it's your own database, but you have to set it up to do that. So I wouldn't say it's a prerequisite, but it really helps to follow the activities of your donors in order to predict what they're actually going to do.
Thank you, Greg. And as your moderator, I'm always enthusiastic. You know, Zoom is a weird medium, as we all know, to try to have conversations. So I appreciate you jumping in and us moving moving out of dead air. Matthew, thank you so much, and please go ahead.
All right, thank you, Anne. So, you know, for me, in terms of prerequisites, you know, number one, you need a database. If you keep all of your data in Microsoft Excel, then unless you're a really special person in terms of setting up your data in as clean and consistent a way as possible, then it's almost a sure thing that you're not going to be implementing AI. But you know, once you have that database going for you, that database needs to be frequently updated and periodically cleaned up. You know, the more frequent the database cleanups, the better. But over and above those basic fundamental prerequisites, in terms of data sources that I've traditionally liked to use when implementing AI, I mean, these are things like biographical details, event participation, volunteerism, gift history, solicitation history, membership, if it is a membership-driven organization. But all in all, whatever kind of organization that you lead, having your data in a consistent format that is easily accessible is key. It's really important.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to check if anyone else wants to comment on this.
I would echo and amplify Celeste's comment about bias here. I think when you're talking about data, that's your first starting point is your donor database, right? So your CRM is going to have, as Matthew mentioned, demographic data, transactional data with respect to your constituents in your particular organization. As data becomes it's growing every day, and there's public sources as well. One of the prerequisites is that you have some kind of unique identifier in your database that's allowing you to append data to a particular constituent of interest or organizations of interest. And some of the bias questions, things that come up, do you have a data governance process? Do you have a data integrity process? When you're adding, let's say, employer information or some other kind of demographic detail, do you have a timestamp in your database to know when that information was added? Do you have audit processes to look at duplicate records? And AI can actually even help in some of those respects. I would also throw out to the practitioners online today, as you're trying to make sense of all of this, please be advised that at least 70% of your time on some of these AI and data science projects is going to be in data management and cleanup. So the real world is very messy, and you're going to start diving into structured data that, third normal form, the database conforms to a database standard, and then this rich, explosive world of unstructured data, documents, and that's where AI can really, and some of these data science tools can bridge and help us create a more holistic 360-degree picture of a constituent, right? So it's not just who you think I am with the interactions I've had with your organization, but maybe pieces I've written online. What information could you extract out of documents and video and some of these other things that could then come together and create a composite profile, so to speak. So yeah, if key takeaways, there's structured and unstructured data. Data is growing, and AI and these tools can help you extract useful information and patterns out of that data. And make sure you have some kind of process or someone's accountable in your organization for verifying the validity and credibility and cleanliness and truthiness of your data.
Yes, it always all comes back to data hygiene. I feel like I've spent a shocking amount of my career on that. I think I heard a yes from Alan. Alan, did you have something to add, or you just wanted to amen Roger?
I wanted to amen Roger. I do have a slight bit to add as well. Coming from an organization that's all about data, data for good, data hygiene, there is a ton of data out there. And I think the points made by Roger, by Greg, and by Matthew were well served in terms of you start with your own database, and that's really where you should really be looking at how you're collecting data, how you're sort of tagging data, all of that, and looking at what's available. But the one piece that I would add to all of that is also understanding what your objectives are. So if you have an event-based objective and it's more of a peer-to-peer program and it's more about communications, there's great behavioral data out there, social media data, when you're looking at traditional media data that can help you implement different strategies, marketing, communication. If it's more wealth-based and you're looking for your new major gift donor, or looking at those that maybe could be a planned giving donor. So there's great financial information out there to add. So there's tons of data out there by different vendors. I'm not gonna raise my hand on that one, but both sides of the border, and it's just a matter of what are you looking for, and then what pieces are missing in that profile that you have. What are your gaps, and then where can you go accumulate it? Because good data added to what you have really can add to the AI practices that you're trying to get. So it really speaks to, or what we say, garbage in, garbage out. Bad data on your own side, as well as the bad data that you collect, really doesn't get you the results that you're looking for. And it doesn't necessarily tie back to the practice or the AI application that you're using as well.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to suggest we move on to our next question. Do you need special software to use AI? And I understand this is a little bit of a complicated answer. So I don't know if who wants to jump in first to help us understand this.
I don't mind tackling this, and certainly I welcome any follow-ups or counterpoints from my other panelists. So you can certainly purchase software that sits as a layer on top of your donor CRM, and then you can get like all sorts of real-time updated predictions on what you should do with each one of your donors, and those predictions make use of AI models that are run and rerun all the time. It's not completely necessary, but it might definitely be helpful if you don't have the analytical capacity within your own organization, and you're unwilling to pay for outside consultants. On the other hand, using software that sits as a layer on top of your donor CRM is not completely necessary. So I had alluded to, you know, it is definitely quite possible to have someone on staff who has the right training. And if you do, there are in fact data analysis tools that you can buy for much cheaper than having one of those like layered software packages, and also other data analysis tools that are even free. And these software tools that someone inside your organization or an outside consultant could use can definitely be used to create AI models. And you know, that's my perspective on the matter.
Thank you so much. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to move to the next question. If someone wants to, on the next one, they'll call back to this one, please feel free. And I'm also going to note to the panel, once we wrap up this question, I'm going to go alphabetically to each of you and ask you for a few closing remarks. So you can start thinking about what you're going to say. You're going to have about a little bit over a minute to talk. But before we get there, which will be in a few minutes, our final formal question is, what steps would you recommend for nonprofits interested in getting started with AI with their data? Or if you still have some thoughts on the previous question about special software and AI, I'd like to open this up to the panel.
Hi, everyone. I'd quickly jump in and say you're all here today because you're curious and interested in AI. So in terms of moving this forward, setting that intention, let this be a summer of code for you. Pick one project that you think you could pilot within your organization and that you're passionate about, because that passion will help and curiosity will help sustain your interest when you're learning more about some of this software. So I would say starting from a why, a place of curiosity, starting from a place of a problem that you see, something that could be automated, something that you want to learn, that you think would have value and impact in your organization. That's a really good kind of compass or North Star, if you will, for driving your experiential learning. And I'm a big fan of learning through doing. Create a sandbox and be a Pied Piper, if you will, and invite people along on your journey. So maybe there's an analyst in another department, or maybe it's a one-person band, and you have to kind of on the fringes find and scrape some time together. But starting with that question is a really good place, because the question will drive the data that you need and then some of the tools, which we can talk more about.
Awesome, thank you. That sounds like a cool summer project. Did anyone else have some thoughts about steps you'd recommend for nonprofits interested in getting started with AI for their data?
Sure. This has already kind of been said by Alan and Roger, but look at what organizations can do for you. What are you trying to do? What kind of data do you have? And there's organizations represented here today, right? What can they do to help you? And just kind of answering a question from earlier, if your data is a mess, some people can help you clean that up. I mean, that's part of what FundMetric does, is because we know from speaking to so many charities, and I'm probably speaking to people that there today that think their data is too messy to do anything, but we've seen the messiest data. Go ahead and try to beat it, and it can be cleaned up and augmented, and you can find some answers with it. But to Roger's point, yeah, go out and try something, right? I mean, that always generates information anyway. As somebody coming from the academic world, there's only one way to find out. Try something out.
Thank you. That's awesome, Greg. Celeste, did you have something you wanted to add here?
No, I think Greg covered it well.
Okay, great. I'm just going to allow one last moment here. before we go into final remarks. So if anyone has a last thought on this, and just a reminder of the panel, I'll be going alphabetically by first name. So any final remarks on getting started with AI with their data for nonprofits? Feel like I'm an auctioneer going once, going twice? Sold? Alan, would you please give us a few, maybe a minute or minute and a bit of some parting thoughts on this topic?
No problem. I guess it actually kind of dovetails with question number 7. And with any project that we look at Environics, and it's really coming back to, and I think it's been mentioned a couple of times, it's looking, what are your objectives? What are you trying to do? What sort of the cause that you're trying to, or the goal that you're trying to get to? So if you're an event-based organization and you're trying to get more people to attend your events, look at what AI practices there are, what data is available, and then go from there. Or what's, a business objective that you have that you can solve. So we talked about, and it was mentioned, to test a summer project, which is terrific and a great way to start. But just make sure that it's tied to something so you can actually see some wins, you can learn along the way, but also it helps sort of move your organization forward, which will also get you not only some wins, but other people to support you along the way. So you'll get some people to start to understand and support the activities that you're doing. Because sometimes practices or getting into data and AI is not always understood or supported by others in the organization. So by kind of tailoring it to a specific business problem or a goal and having a small little win, that allows you to start to bring more people on board along for the ride with you. So what I would say is just make sure it's aligned to a goal that you have as an organization. Make sure it's aligned to sort of what you do as an organization. And then just pick the right vendors or sort of partner along the journey that can kind of teach you how to fish.
Great, thanks so much, Alan. Celeste, love to hear your parting thoughts for, maybe a bit more than a minute.
Well, I fear that all our parting thoughts are probably going to sound fairly similar, because I think there's some truisms here. I think I would start with the data piece, like a lot of my other panelists have touched on, that really getting that data house in order, getting it clean, and getting more of it integrated so that you can actually use it. That link between different data systems is really key. But also, just to echo on what Alan said, that question, what is it you're attempting to do? And be really clear on the business objective that you're trying to align whatever project it is with, because it's always easier to get buy-in if you can really show movement on something that's going to move the organization forward, as opposed to, something that's either, a bit of a pet project, or maybe something that's just too big. Because getting that little piece, like Alan touched on, and getting the win will help build a culture around it and build confidence around it, much more than, something grand that maybe doesn't ever quite get off the ground. The other thing I'm going to say is, when you're talking about AI, and those of you who are here today, like others have noted, are interested in AI, but I find that's not the same with everybody in charities, and not all fundraisers are quite as keen on this as others. It sometimes helps to talk about how AI is already around us, in addition to what you want to do. So back to Matthew's point at the very beginning, AI is really anything that used to be what people could only do. And so when we think about some of the things like, how Google Maps gets better all the time, how voice recognition and transcription software works, that used to be really leading edge, and now we just kind of take it for granted. If you point that out sometimes to people and say, look guys, it's here, this is just the next step, sometimes it makes it a little bit less scary.
Thank you so much, Celeste. And Greg, what are your last moment thoughts?
Of course, just as has been said, gather and label data. And if your data is a mess, the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The next best time is right now. I just dug up 2 cherry trees yesterday, so I feel a little weird saying that. But then once you have that data, attack this with rigor, right? There's a lot of us, you guys have a lot of assumptions. Most of them are right. So most of what AI is going to come out and tell you is going to confirm what you already thought, although the point about bias is really important, of course. It's going to tell you what happened in the past. But make sure you attack it with rigor. And the other point is we still need you. Like, I hate when AI scares people. Like this isn't meant to take your job. It's supposed to help you raise more money. And there's going to be stuff that pops out that says stuff that doesn't make any sense because the data wasn't there to help the machine figure out that person shouldn't have been on your list. And of course, if this is all daunting, there are organizations here that have been doing this for years. The people here have already shown they know how all this works, so you can reach out to them and us.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. And thank you, Roger. If you haven't noticed, Roger's putting tons of stuff in the chat. Roger, we'll get to you in a minute. But Matthew, your last thoughts.
Thank you, Anne. So I guess I would just encourage people to think about AI as something that, to Greg's point, doesn't replace you, but something that helps you in your journey to doing your job as fundraisers in as efficient a way as possible. It's helping you to race to those opportunities and to stay away from problem areas that really won't work so well. And obviously, all of us is assuming that, to borrow a term from Celeste, assuming that your data house is in order. And that's my closing thoughts.
Thank you. Sorry, I was actually taking notes from what Roger had put in the chat. So Roger, if you could just give us a moment or two, and then we'll have Alan do the formal thank you.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm putting some stuff in the chat that you feel free to, as a point of departure, because this is an ongoing dialogue as a lifelong learner. AI is here. The future of work is upon us. And so I invite everybody here to really plug in, connect to this conversation, and move forward. You can build or buy solutions within your organizations. You have to really look at your capacity and realistically assess what you have the time and resources to do. But familiarizing yourself with this language of AI today is a great entry point into this conversation so that you can become a well-versed practitioner. You can speak on some of the capabilities and continually make yourself aware. I would remind everybody that this field continues to evolve very rapidly and quickly. So in 6 months, there could be new tools, new vendors, new software solutions. There are open source, are in Python and a variety of different libraries for those who are so inclined. For those who are less technical, it's still valuable to think through a lot of the topics that we've surfaced today, considerations, implications. And I would also offer everybody to really think about this theory of change within their organizations and impact what they're trying to do, their mission, and how AI and technology can enable to move their missions forward. And there's a lot of research. You go to your local library, go to your institutional subscriptions, and start researching things like social identity theory, and understand how people's identities are informed by their interactions with your institutions. And then you can start using bridging technology there to solve for particular problems. But again, the goal is to understand your constituents even better so you can offer them services, programs, and so forth that add value.
Wow, thank you guys so much. I heard donors know we have the data and expect us to use us. I heard AI can't question bias. When someone tells you who they are, believe them, and that's what data does for us. You can use other data to make your data richer, but if your data is a mess, you'll miss opportunities. Heard talk about cognitive insights and cognitive engagements with data, and that it's hard to, AI can predict things where we have patterns, but it doesn't do as well for things that we don't have a lot of a track record on. So Alan, I'm turning it over to you for the last word.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you for moderating today. Did a great job and really appreciate your time today with us. And I wanted to thank all the moderators today, Roger, Greg, Celeste, and Matthew. Thank you. Special shout out to Matthew as my co-host in putting this all together. And I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, a quick reminder that we have been recording this session and we'll make it available to everyone. We'll email you in the next coming days as we edit this piece together. And any questions that have been asked, we'll collect them and we'll distribute them amongst the panelists to help us answer the questions and send them back to you. And any of the links and whatnot, we'll also share them as well. So thank you once again, and stay tuned for potentially another session coming up in the next couple of weeks. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, guys. You guys were great.
Thank you, Anne, so much. Thank you, everybody.
It was a great discussion today. Thank you, guys. It was awesome. I learned a lot.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.